It's the 20th anniversary of Jet Set Radio! Number 25.
For relaxing times, make it Suntory time.
カットカットカットカット時間がないんだよ。ね、パッションがカメラテンション上げて。
with intensity.
Is that everything? It seemed like you said more than that.
Yes, this is Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation. It's the only Sofia Coppola film on my list, although I love Virgin Suicides. I think it's really good. This film speaks to me because during my 20s, when I was kind of in a place of not really knowing myself and whatnot, like, you know, it's kind of one of those things like a mid-20s crisis almost. I kind of just sold a bunch of stuff and decided to take a week and a half trip to Japan by myself. And the film captures, because I did it alone, I pretty much for, I'd say 75% of the trip, even though I met someone and we kind of hung out and stuff while we were over there, I'd say for pretty much most of the trip, I was by myself in a place that was not familiar. I knew the language more or less to get around and be able to talk to people, but like, it's still like, I watched this film and it takes me back to those feelings of a weird type of loneliness. And I know that it's not like kind of a hidden thing, or it's not an esoteric thing to say that this film is about loneliness, but it captures a certain type of loneliness that is very self-reflective. It's not the same kind of loneliness as when you're home by yourself for a weekend, when you normally wouldn't be. It's a loneliness where you kind of feel like, because everything is not communicating with you in the same way you would communicate normally, that it's a self-reflective, isolated, almost like a sensory deprivation kind of loneliness. And it's a beneficial loneliness. And I think that that's what this film captures really, really well. This isn't even to talk about just like the relationship between Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson as it goes throughout the film, the way that the film is shot, the way that it basically just captures being in Tokyo. This is more of a personal pick, because every time I watch it, it takes me back to that place, which, like, loneliness has a negative connotation, but this loneliness is very self-aware and very mindful. And sometimes when I get into a place where I kind of get wrapped up in my own problems, or situations where I just feel like I'm kind of running in place, or that I don't know what I'm doing, you know, being able to get back to that place really helps. And that's what this film kind of encapsulates to me, is that feeling of being in a place, and not like a physical place, but being mentally in a place where you can finally just be with yourself and kind of figure yourself out.
I just don't know what I'm supposed to be.
You'll figure that out. The more you know who you are and what you want, the less you let things upset you.
You really are having a midlife crisis, huh?
I'm going to say this for a lot of movies, but let's get weird. Number 24.
Ο αδερφός σας πέθανε. Ένα πλάσμα σαν αυτό που εισέβαλε σήμερα στον κήπο τον διαμέλισε. Το ζώο που μας απειλεί λέγεται γάτα. Είναι το πιο επικίνδυνο ζώο που υπάρχει.
I don't know how many of you have heard of this film. That's another thing I'll probably say a lot. But this is Dogtooth by Yorgos Lanthimos. Yorgos Lanthimos is a Greek director who did movies like Alps He also did The Lobster, Killing of a Sacred Deer, and most recently, The Favorite, which was an amazing movie. But this is Dogtooth. This is a surreal film. It's hard to explain. I can explain the plot. The plot's very simple. It's basically a couple and their 3 adult children that they keep locked in a compound and basically teach them that everything outside the compound is dangerous, and teaches them basically like ways to live and stuff in the compound, and just has these very like just like abstract and like absurd rules and things like that. The name Dogtooth comes from the fact that the parents tell the children that they can finally leave the compound when their dog tooth, their canine tooth, falls out, which isn't going to happen, probably. So, what I love about this film is it can be hard to watch. Yorgos Lanthimos, if you know him, if you've watched Killing of a Sacred Deer, if you've watched Lobster, his line delivery, especially for films that he has written, he didn't write The Favorite, so The Favorite, if you don't like Yorgos Lanthimos' writing style and the way like he directs like his actors to read and recite his lines, like in Killing of a Sacred Deer or in The Lobster, then watch The Favorite. He didn't write that, but he directed it, and he does a beautiful job directing it. But the dialogue is told in a very stilted way. The characters are like framed weirdly, like just like parts of their body are cropped off in certain areas, off frame. The characters, like, you're not gonna get multi-dimensional characters here. You're gonna get a surreal experience that is it's a satire, more or less. Some people, I think even David Lynch called it like one of his favorite comedies that has come out recently, and I wouldn't classify it as a comedy. It's a surreal, dark, just weird movie about this family, specifically the kids in the family, that have been isolated for all of their lives. Not like that scene that was in the trailer, the father basically, like, they saw a cat in the yard, and it was the first time they had ever seen a cat. And the father basically pretends that the cat killed this brother that they believe exists on the other side of the wall, and teaches them that cats are one of the most dangerous predators out there. And why would they teach them that? And there's like easy commentary to be seen in this about like homeschooling or something like that. And I have personal experience dealing with kids that have been homeschooled, especially in religious environments. But there's no religion in this, really, as far as I remember. But it could easily extrapolate it to just talking about, from an outsider perspective, how people can insulate themselves within their own belief systems, especially if they themselves isolate themselves from outside influence. It's a very strange movie. It's not going to be for everyone. I completely recognize that. But this is one of those films that I saw this after I'd seen a lot of other Yorgos Lanthimos movies. But this is one that, like, I think I think The Favorite is his best movie. But this is the one that kind of resonated with me more. And it's very just bizarre. And I love bizarre things.
Ένα παιδί είναι έτοιμο να φύγει από το σπίτι του όταν
Πέσει ο δεξιός κοινόδοντας.
μόνο τότε ο οργανισμός είναι έτοιμος να αντιμετωπίσει όλους τους κινδύνους που παραφυλάνε.
Let's get really surreal with number 23.
もしもし。もしもし。もしもし。
This is Tetsuo Iron Man. If you know me, you already know I like this film, and I guess I'll explain why, but it's that's the whole point of this video, is me explaining why I like this movie. So this is a very short, I think it's only an hour long, experimental film. There is a story, and I'll just tell you the story because it's actually better to know the story a little bit going into it so you don't have to worry about the story. The story is basically this young couple accidentally hits a metal fetishist with their car, and as he lies dying in the ditch, they have sex. And the male of the couple basically starts to be engulfed by metal body parts and, you know, hydraulics and things like that. And the film is, that's pretty much it. That's the story. So it's a weird story, right? Go figure. It's my list. But this film is an experience. I am a firm believer that a film does not have to have a great story to be a great film. I believe that film just kind of, I feel like film, just like art, can have two ends of spectrum, right? Hyper-realism and structured, and then abstract and experimental. So you could have your still life that's very, very neat and photorealistic. And then on the other end, you could have your weird minimalism, your Dadaism, your just abstract art, whatever, right? And this is definitely leaning towards that end of the spectrum. But what it does is it feels, from the very moment you watch this, every bit of your senses is being attacked. And I'm not talking like your eye, not just your vision, because he pretty much did this by himself. I think this was just him working on this film, but it uses really good, I mean, it's dated, but like, and it's not like, you know, Tim Burton or Ray Harryhausen levels of stop motion, but effective stop motion, practical effects, stuff like that. So there's your visual cues. Audio cues is the next thing you're going to notice. And this film is like, every sound just hits. It sounds like kind of what you imagine it would sound like. Metal grating against teeth, and the sounds of like just industry, basically. This film sounds like industry. There's only one other film in here on this list. You might know what it is already, that really captures the sound of industry and industrialization better. But what this film also does is it attacks your other senses too. You can feel like the sweat and the heat, and you can just put yourself in that position when you watch it. You can smell just like the smell of like iron and like just like industrial fluid and stuff like that, and you can taste it too even when you're watching this. This is a sensory experiential film. It's not a great story. It's not a great acted movie, but it is a sensory experience. And the music is fucking awesome. This film is going to be hard to talk about, and I'm not looking forward to it, but I want to. And I'm going to go ahead and give a trigger warning. If you have issues with the portrayal of race in a negative fashion, this is going to be hard to watch. It's number 22.
I want a show that will make headlines. The Huxtables, Cosby, a genius, revolutionary. But we can't go down that road again.
The network does not want to see Negroes on television unless they are buffoons.
Have you ever thought about just quitting?
I have a contract. The only way I get out of that is if I get fired. And that is what I intend to do.
This is Spike Lee's Bamboozled. I'm going to just tell you the story first. Damon Wayans plays a writer at a television network who is tasked with coming up with a television show that is hip and basically Michael Rappaport does a great job in this, by the way, of being someone you just hate. That appeals to a certain demographic in a way that Michael Rappaport feels is appropriate. I'll put it that way. I think you know where I'm coming from. Damon Wayans, because he's under contract and cannot just quit the job, even though he hates the job and hates what he's being asked to do, decides that, a la producers, he's just going to make something so terrible and offensive that he gets fired. So he comes up with the idea of creating Mantan, the new millennium minstrel show, by putting black actors in blackface as satire and having them perform a minstrel show a la the 19th century, to include racial stereotyping and what caricature, everything. And the show becomes a huge success and is the biggest thing in entertainment and media. And it's the ramifications of the realization that is what people want. Now, there's another Spike Lee movie that appears on this list. And you can probably guess what it is if you know his filmography. But this is my second favorite Spike Lee film. Issues that I've had with some, and what some people have issues with some of Spike Lee's films, is they can feel very heavy-handed in the way that the points that Spike Lee are trying to get across can come across stilted, and they can come across as clumsy, forced, right? I have no issues with what he is trying to say, or that he is trying to say what he's trying to say. It's more of the delivery of it that I can have issues with sometimes. Da 5 Bloods had some of that. It did it very artistically, and it did it in a very interesting way in a lot of ways. BlacKkKlansman had issues a little bit with it. Not really. BlacKkKlansman is very kind of mainstream Hollywood relative to other Spike Lee films, especially relative to this. This is his most acerbic, in-your-face, just balls to the wall film about racism, in my opinion. And it does not hold back. And I admire that a ton. This film was not generally well received, I don't think, when it came out. But, it's very prescient. It was true. It felt true when it came out, and it still feels true now. And the last 2 or 3 minutes of this film are some of the saddest and hardest to watch 2 or 3 minutes, because all it is a montage of clips from films, cartoons, and stuff like that, basically showing stereotypical and caricatural portrayals of African Americans in media. This film, the issues that I said I had with some of his delivery sometimes, I think it can still come across in certain instances in this film. There's still parts of this film that feel a little out of place. Specifically, there's a shootout that occurs with one person that survives. That feels a little kind of out of place a bit. But like the interactions between characters and the way that they talk about these issues feels natural. It feels like it's not out of place. There is one part that does take me out a bit, and it's early on in the film, where Michael Rappaport just keeps saying the N-word over and over again, and says, Quentin Tarantino was right, it's just a word, and white people should be able to say it. And if you don't know the history of that, I would look up the history between Spike Lee and Quentin Tarantino. I'm kind of on Spike Lee's side on this one a bit. But, anyways, it's a very hard to watch movie, and it's hard to talk about. You can probably hear that I'm more somber talking about this movie than I am talking about other ones. I watched it literally 2 days ago again. And I bumped some other films off the list to put this on here because I saw it around the time it came out, and it was impactful, but I kind of forgot about it, and then I watched it again recently, and the fact that it has gotten it's still as relevant now as it was then is impressive. I do want to make special note that this film was shot on mini DV, and it was a very early film moving from just like your kind of celluloid, film to mini DV. And so there's scenes in this that look like really washed out, almost like 480p YouTube. But it is so effective. It feels like a documentary. And in the way that it's shown and stuff, and the way that things are filmed, and it adds to the realism, and it adds to how it kind of almost creates, like, it kind of breaks down this feeling that, well, this is a contrived, fictional, on the screen story. But then, like, the way that, like, when they show the first audience reactions and stuff like that, and the way that certain people are acting and talking about things using this mini DV, and it feels documentary-like. And I think that it fits it really well. This is one that's important. And especially in America, and it's worth watching. Again, it's very hard to watch. And it's very uncomfortable, but it should be. It absolutely should be uncomfortable to watch.
You notice that everybody white want to be black.
How about raising up?
They all act better, sound better.
When are you gonna come into the light?
The light.
The light.
Your hands are just as bloody as mine.
Cousins, I want you all to go to your windows.
We talking about revolution.
Go to your windows and yell out, I am not gonna take it anymore!
That was really heavy. Number 21.
Millions of miles from home, we have finally found intelligent life with the courage to contact us and the will to annihilate us.
Here it comes! Get out of here now!
It's Starship Troopers by Paul Verhoeven, the director of RoboCop and Showgirls, which is good. And Total Recall, you know him whether you know it or not. He also did Basic Instinct, which stars Sharon Stone. I'm getting it right this time. So, most of you have probably seen Starship Troopers, so I don't need to explain what it's about. But what is brilliant about this movie, and people are finally coming around to it, is the whole movie is a propaganda film. The whole movie is basically almost like you are one of these young... You can imagine this film being shown in a high school in this setting, or in, like, as a recruitment video, basically. because it involves like just a like this film was not like this film was considered pro-fascist when it came out by a lot of people. And it's just it might be crazy to think that watching this. Like, how could anyone not see the satire in this? In fact, there might be people that watch it now that don't realize it's satire. But it's the thing I love about it most is just how, if you watch this from the framework of the film we are watching is a propaganda film in this universe itself, this film becomes just beautiful to watch. It explains so much too. Why is Casper Van Dien the protagonist when he looks like he's in his late 20s? Why is Denise Richards a high school student as well? They basically make the bugs seem like super, like, you know, evil and invaders and stuff like that, but like if you view it as in the form of propaganda, like they claim that the bugs attacked first, but there's no real indication they did. That's before the scope of this film, right? Anyways, it's really, really good. The biggest thing that's most impressive to this day about this film is the special effects. There's only one film on here that is older whose special effects are just as good, if not better. But even I've watched this on Blu-ray, and the special effects still look freaking phenomenal on Blu-ray. They still used models for a lot of scenes. They did a lot of, and there's a lot of CGI and stuff, but the CGI is super effective. I think it was one of the special effects artists that did Jurassic Park did the special effects on this, if I remember correctly. It's just a fun movie to watch. It's quotable, and it feels so. Like, part of the issue was, like, some people thought, like, especially the nudity and sex and like a lot of the violence was like excessive or gratuitous. But if you look at it within the context of this being a propaganda film, it's exploitation, right? It's exploiting this stuff for the benefit of entertainment, right? If this was just a straight, like, imagine like you're making this film in this fictional universe to like recruit the youth for the fight, right? Like, if you just showed them, like, you know, your regular old, you know, war kind of stuff and like training and whatnot, right? It's not as like it's not going to capture their attention. But you start throwing in some just nudity, and you start throwing in some sex and some violence and, you know, just raw war hero stuff, and, you know, it feels like it fits a little better. So this is one that luckily it feels like over the past like 5 or 10 years, people are starting to come around on more and kind of realize like the satire that's kind of built into it. But if you haven't watched it, I recommend watching it with the view that it's satire. But also try to recognize why people might think it's pro-fascist. And if you have seen it, but didn't like it or just kind of thought it was meh, try watching it with that frame of mind of this being a propaganda film for this fictional fight that these kids are being recruited to die for.
We're under attack, sir. We need retrieval now. Fire! Kill them all!
From the director of Total Recall and RoboCop.
You wanna live forever?
Starship Troopers.